evil, you're crazy, or you're sick, or that's wrong, or whatever the case may be. They borrow from our worldview in order to make their point. And we got to hold them to that. If someone's going to create a worldview, and they're going to have to live in it. And if they can't live in it, then the worldview is false. So point number 4 is that atheists can't argue from within their own worldview. So what have we done so far? We've shown that the premise of the problem of evil, we cut the knees off of it, right? We show that it doesn't do anything to support the worldview of the person that's actually making the claim. We've shown that there's no way that a Christian can ever support or to come to a valid answer with a negative argument. We've shown that they can't argue within their own worldview. You follow me so far? So this is what's called a theodicy, all right? So what are some of the sources of moral evil? Well, we have this concept called moral free agency. I don't call it moral free will because ultimately God can supersede our free will if he's sovereign. So he's an agency. God gave us, all men and angels, the capacity to do moral good. In order to do moral good, we must have something to compare to, don't we? This little claim here that's underlined, it's mine. Could be true, couldn't be true. Anybody sees any problems with it? Great. But material beings cannot recognize metaphysical things without contrast. Does everybody know what a metaphysical thing is? It's something that exists, but it's not physical. So thoughts, for instance. So if you think about it, we can recognize physical things without a contrast. We know that what a chair is. We don't need to look at a table to see what a chair is. But we can't know the difference between heat and cold without having a contrast between the two. You have to have heat or the absence of heat in order to have cold. Or you have to have light in the absence of light in order to see darkness. And so in order for a non-physical, metaphysical being like God to make his self known and apparent, he had to use some sort of contrast for physical beings to be able to recognize him. In other words, there would be no moral good if there was not a contrast to it. God did not give us the ability to act as evil as we absolutely can. He gave us a conscience. We see a concept of pure evil through Satan. We see as bad as we can absolutely act. We see what happens when people go to hell and they continually curse God. But God gave us a conscience so that we can see the difference between right and wrong. Unfortunately, if we're not perfect 100% of the time, we have a problem, right? And that's why we had to have a perfect Savior come down here to give us the way. And God allows evil because it teaches us the virtues needed to be in eternal communion with the Creator. So in other words, when we're tested and we have trials, we can tell we're actually building the virtue within us to help us become stronger. And we see that all over the place. Certainly we see that in Peter in the study we're going through. And we see that here in Romans 8:28 as well. So let's look at this from a biblical standpoint. Certainly there are a lot of this, but I think this is probably the easiest one to look at, which is Genesis 50:20, and it's the story of Joseph and his brothers, right? Because we see a lot there. We see that, to paraphrase, that what you intended or meant for evil, God intended, or in this particular version, meant for good. So if we just look at the words in that particular section, we see a few things. Number one, we see the you and the human you, which is the human race. Now, probably a good bet that this you can be called the human race unless for some reason Joseph's brothers had some sort of quality that the rest of us don't have. So we have the intent to commit moral crime. So that's a moral free agency. So we have the intention of doing it. We can do it. God has allowed us to do that. We see that in God's point of view that his meant is the capacity to see future events. He knew what we were going to do from the beginning of time and was able to act. I realize I'm using some kind of strange words. God knows everything from the very beginning, like the pothead said a couple videos back. But so we see that, that God's meant is his capacity to act on future events. And his good is the ability to weave those events together for his purpose. So what do we have here? Whether this is a good answer for a non-Christian or not, that's it. We have the human race's ability to act because of moral free agency. We have the ability to act in a manner other than good, which is evil. And we have God's ability to see those events and weave those events together for his purpose. But here's the problem that we see, and this is a uniquely American problem, is that it's built right into our Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so when we're not happy, God doesn't like me. We see God as some sort of cosmic human being. I mean, Bruce Almighty, I don't know if you saw it on TV last night, but I watched Evan, whatever. Yeah, Evan Almighty, the second one, where the dude turns into Noah, all right? In there, he's talking to God, and he says to God, well, this building an ark thing's not really in my plans. I moved my family here from Buffalo and starting this new job as a congressman, and, building an ark's just not in my plans. And God starts laughing at him. And when Evan says, what are you laughing at? He said, your plans. That's funny. See, God has a plan. His plan is much greater than our plan. And he's going to use us as vessels to, first and foremost, whether we like it or not, for his glory. That's why we're here, to glorify God, like it or not. And so what we see is if I'm not happy, God doesn't like me anymore. And in reality, God likes us a whole bunch, doesn't he? Let's see here. There we go. Whoops. Seriously? So this is Matthew 5:10 through 11. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evils against you, falsely, on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Excuse me. I lost my place there. So basically, if we're going through evils, we're going through evils because God likes us a lot. Hey kid, you want a donut? Because if she doesn't eat it, I'm going to eat it. All right. So, don't eat the whole. I need the whole for later. So in a nutshell, what do we have here? God uses evil to build character, virtue, in a finite or material creatures, that's us, so that we can enter into communion with him. God does restrain evil through instilling upon us a conscience, so we know the difference between right and wrong. He gives all men a helper, and that's the important thing. This is not something that's just limited to Christians. All men have a conscience. Atheists have to borrow from us to make their points. The problem of evil does not prove our opponent's point of view. We cut that right off at the knees from the very beginning. And it is impossible to prove a negative argument. Why didn't God create us with gills? But that answers only one half of the argument, right? I'm going to need sound. And I'm going to warn you. What you're about to hear is bad. Okay? So, are we good there? Okay. Now I'm going to play a 911 call real quick, and I'll just let it run for a minute here. If anybody starts to cry, I promise I'll turn it off.
Hill County 911, what's your emergency?
I just killed my children.
Excuse me?
I just killed my children.
Where are you?
I'm in the abandoned house on Highway 77 right after you go underneath the highway. One of them's still alive. Hurry.
How? Under what highway? You're on Highway 77 where?
I'm on Highway 77 right after you go under 35 going towards Milford. Get an ambulance out here to save the one that didn't die. Come on. Hurry up.
What's your name?
Bitch, call them. Have you already called them?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Okay.
I need your name.
I don't want to say your name. And one of them's still